Howdy, Chris here, and welcome back to Garage Noise. Last week, this Nissan Frontier came in with some peeling paint. This is not uncommon to see with Nissan, Ford, Chevy. There's been a big problem with the adhesion of paint on mainly these white trucks. So rather than just try and patch up these peeling areas, we went ahead and stripped down the bedside and stripped down the hood, and I walked you through that entire process to get it prepped out for paint. Today we'll be finishing up this repair, and I'm going to walk you through step by step the entire process of painting this truck with a base coat, clear coat finish, so you have the information you need to get your project done. So let's dig in and get started. So this truck is all ready for paint. We're going to go ahead and mask it off. Now we're not going to go over into detail on how to mask. That'll be for another video. For our final preparation, we sanded our bedside and our hood and the blend areas on the fenders with 600 to 800 grit sandpaper. We used 800, but 600 to 800 is sufficient. That's going to give you enough of a scratch that it's going to adhere properly, but not too much of a scratch where it's going to show through. The gun we're using today is the Inokraft Drizzle D1. This is a low volume, low pressure paint gun. It consumes less air. It's going to produce less overspray and save you in materials. As far as the air pressure, we're going to set it at 24 PSI for base. Now our fluid volume, which is this knob here, is we're going to set that at 2.5 turns out from closed with our fan pattern wide open. I'll use air pressure from the gun here just to wipe this down with a tack rag just before we spray our base. So this tack rag is a sticky cloth that's going to pick up any dust particles that may have landed on this hood while we were mixing up our paint. So we'll clean it off real good, and then we'll start applying our first coat of base. Your first coat of base should be a light to medium coat. You want to avoid putting it on real heavy at first because that could cause some fish eyes or something of that nature. You want to introduce that paint to the surface, let it flash off, and then you can put it a little heavier on the second coat. Now, as far as our technique, you want to have a consistent distance from the panel. Whatever distance that is, I spray about 4 to 5 inches away. And you have a consistent speed. You also want to overlap your passes about 75%. So once I make a pass, I'm going to come back over that previous pass about 75%. This will give you a nice uniform paint coverage. So it's more important when you're spraying metallics. On this white, it's not so crucial, but you just want to get into the habit of overlapping about 75%. I'll go around these edges of this hood real well to make sure we have some good coverage on those. And don't be concerned if your first coat looks a little transparent. You can see that hood. You can still see the primer through it, but that's just the first coat. We're going to build up several coats to get that coverage. We'll tack off this bedside before we start applying our base, and this is a good opportunity to inspect that panel, make sure there was nothing that you've missed, no deep scratches or any imperfections that you want to correct before you start painting. Make sure you get good coverage on the edges of your panels, inside the wheel opening, inside this bed. Those are areas that can easily get missed and can easily be transparent. I'll also put a coat on the edge of this fender because we're blending into this fender so we have a good color match. So I'll blend this right along with the bedside and the hood. We got a little fish eyes. We put it on a little wet, so we got a little fish eyes in our base coat. That's okay. Put it on a little bit drier for this next coat. So this is just a tack cloth. It's a sticky cloth. It's going to pick up any particles of dust or anything of that nature. So when I wipe this down, I'm going to be looking for any trash in the paint, anything that we need to remove. Make sure it's nice and smooth. Feels pretty clean. Consistent speed, consistent distance from the pan. I'm going to overlap about 75–80%. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take this sunlight here and we're going to look over this panel, make sure it's clean, make sure there's it's not transparent, everything's covered. That's our main thing. So right now we're just looking it over. If we see any particles of dust, we want to take care of those now before we clear. But I just want to see if everything's covered. So good spot to look is inside these wheel wells. I think I need one more coat in there. All these edges in here. This is still a little bit wet, so we're not going to tack rag this off right now because it needs a few more minutes to dry. In between coats of base, we allow about 10 to 15 minutes for that base coat to flash off. And what we mean by that is it's basically drying. Chemicals are evaporating out of the surface, and then we can apply our second coat and our third coat. Typically 2 to 3 coats is going to be good coverage depending on the paint that you're using. Some paints cover better than others, and some colors cover better than others. So you just want to keep that in mind. We let this paint flash off for another 15 minutes. We inspected it really well with that sunlight to make sure there's no transparencies. And now we're going to apply our first coat of clear. Now the clear coat we're using today is the Finish One FC710. This is a spot panel clear. Really good clear that buffs out beautifully and flows out nicely as well. Now, as far as the gun settings for clear coat, they're a little bit different than base coat. You want to up your air pressure just a little bit. This gun runs good at about 28 to 30 PSI. And my fluid volume, I'm opening it up to 3 turns out from close. So I close it all the way, open it up 3 turns out, and then of course my fan pattern is wide open. On the first coat of clear, we just want to introduce this clear to the surface. We're not looking for perfection on the first coat. We just want to get a good medium to wet coat on there. And then when we go back and do our second coat, that's when we're going to spray it how we want it to look and get that nice glossy flat finish. The same techniques apply for clear coat as they do for base coat. You want to overlap about 75%. You want to have a consistent speed and a consistent distance from the panel at all times. Spraying clear coat is really not that difficult, and I would encourage you, if you want to get into this profession, or maybe you just want to do it as a hobby, do your own vehicle, or just build your skill, then just get some practice spraying clear coat on a test panel. Play with your air settings and your fluid volume and your speed and your distance, and just get comfortable with how that gun works and how it performs. There's a lot of obstacles and things that can happen as you're painting, and if you learn how to overcome those by practice and just following the proper procedures and techniques when you're spraying, just by doing that, that's going to eliminate 90% of the issues you might run into when painting. If you'd be interested in me creating a video series on how to overcome obstacles when you're painting and the things you might run into, let me know down in the comments below. We are applying 2 coats of clear, and after the first coat, you want to let your clear coat flash off for 10 to 15 minutes before you apply your second coat. We did that off camera. Let's take a look at the finished results. Okay, so we're done with this. Done spraying it anyway. We got to put it together tomorrow. This has a little texture. Spraying whites can be difficult because you can't really see what's going on sometimes. Looks pretty good. It's fairly clean. This fender came out beautifully. The hood, being that it's a flat surface, it came out really nice. A chunk of dirt there and a chunk of dirt there. So a little cut and buff. this thing will be ready to go. So we'll put it together, show you this vehicle all done. We got to put a decal on here, right here. All right, here's a good look at the finished repair. If you found this video helpful and want to help support the channel, the best way to do that is to like, subscribe, and definitely comment down below. I would love to hear from you, and I would love to have you part of our community. Listen, I appreciate each and every one of you watching, and we'll see you next time on Garage Noise.